You need struggle. Constant suffering is an indication of close proximity to God. God does not see as man sees. God sees the heart. God will test you, but you also need to self-inflict struggle and suffering. Let that challenge everything you thought the good life was supposed to look like, because the world has sold you a lie. A comfortable, well-packaged, aggressively marketed lie that says the goal is ease, that the destination is rest, that the measure of a successful life is the absence of difficulty. And millions of people are chasing that version of success, a life with no friction, no resistance, no demand, and arriving at it hollow, empty, asking the question that comfort can never answer. Is this it? The greatest men who ever walked this earth were not great despite their suffering. They were great because of it. The suffering was the selection process. The adversity was the filter. And the ones who came through it, who did not just endure it but leaned into it, who self-inflicted more of it deliberately because they understood what it was doing to them, those are the ones history still carries by name. You are not meant for a comfortable life. You are meant for a significant one. And significance costs exactly what comfort refuses to pay. Every conqueror in history was shaped by suffering so severe that most modern men would medicate it, escape it, or build their entire life around avoiding a repeat of it. The great Macedonian king who marched his army through the Gedrosian desert, the most brutal terrain on earth, losing thousands of men to heat and starvation, did not do it because it was the only route. He did it because he had heard that a Persian king had tried it and failed. He chose the suffering voluntarily. He self-inflicted the most extreme challenge available, not because the mission required it, but because the man required it, because the suffering was the point, because on the other side of that desert was a version of himself, and a version of his men, that no comfortable march could have produced. I am not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I am afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. The lion is made in the desert, not in the palace. The palace receives the lion. The desert produces him. The ancient Stoics did not just philosophize about hardship. They practiced it deliberately. They would voluntarily go without food, without warmth, without the comforts their wealth could easily provide, not as punishment, as training, as the deliberate cultivation of a character that could not be shaken by the loss of those things, because it had already practiced living without them. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself all the while, is this the condition that I feared? That is not deprivation. That is the most sophisticated form of personal development available. It is the voluntary removal of comfort to test and strengthen the self, to confirm that the man exists independently of his conditions, that his peace, his capability, his identity do not depend on the softness of the circumstances around him. Self-inflict the struggle, voluntarily, regularly, before life forces it upon you, because the man who has already chosen hardness can never be surprised by it. God tests the ones he is preparing for something. This is not a comfortable truth. It is the most consistent pattern across the lives of every man and woman who was ever used for something significant. The greater the calling, the more severe the preparation. The larger the platform, the deeper the fire it was built in. The gem cannot be polished without friction, nor man without trials. If you are suffering right now, if the season is long and the relief is not in sight, understand that the duration of the test is not an indication of abandonment. It is an indication of investment. God does not spend this much time and pressure on something he intends to set aside. The intensity of the process is a signal of the magnitude of what is being prepared, and your response during the test, the way you carry yourself in the suffering, the gratitude you find in the fire, the character you choose to be when the weight is heaviest. That is what is being measured, not the result, the response, because the response is the man, and the man is what God is building. The athletes who became legendary, the ones whose names outlast their sport, were not the most naturally gifted. They were the ones who self-inflicted suffering at a level their competition refused to match. The fighter who runs the extra mile at the end of the session, when his lungs are already finished. The player who stays in the gym 2 hours after the team has gone home. The competitor who chooses the harder training partner, the heavier weight, the shorter rest period, not because the coach demanded it, but because the standard within them demanded it. Champions aren't made in gyms. Champions are made from something they have deep inside them, a desire, a dream, a vision. They have to have the skill and the will, but the will must be stronger than the skill. The will is built in the self-inflicted suffering. Every voluntary hard thing you choose, every session that goes beyond what was asked, every morning that started before it was required, every comfort refused in favor of the harder option, is a deposit into the will. And the will, compounded over years of voluntary suffering, becomes the thing that no opponent, no obstacle, and no circumstance can overcome. Your actions during the suffering are not separate from your character. They are the construction of your character, in real time, brick by brick, choice by choice. The man who becomes bitter in his suffering builds a bitter character. The man who becomes grateful in his suffering builds a grateful character. The man who becomes lazy in his suffering builds a lazy character. And the man who becomes relentless, who uses the pain as fuel, who turns the adversity into ambition, who looks at the hard season and decides, this is making me, builds a character that is worth something. Every difficulty in life presents us with the opportunity to turn inward and to invoke our own submerged inner resources. The trials we endure can and should introduce us to our strengths. You are meeting your strengths right now, in the struggle, in the place that is most uncomfortable. The strengths do not exist before the test, they are revealed by it. And the man who self-inflicts struggle is the man who is always meeting new versions of his own strength, always pushing the boundary of what he knew he was capable of, always discovering that the limit he thought he had was not the actual limit, just the last one he had tested. The greatest business builders of the modern age did not build in comfort. They built in chaos, in uncertainty, in periods of personal and professional suffering that most people would have accepted as a sign to stop. The ones who built empires started with nothing, or worse than nothing, with debt, with doubt, with people around them actively predicting their failure. And they chose to suffer through it. They chose to stay in the uncertainty. They self-inflicted longer hours, harder decisions, more risk, more exposure, because they understood at a gut level that the suffering was the gap between them and the men who would never build what they were building. The price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. The price of the significant life is suffering, voluntarily chosen, actively embraced, properly interpreted, not endured reluctantly and complained about, embraced deliberately as the cost of becoming something rare. Pay it fully. Pay it every day, and pay it with the understanding that every ounce of suffering invested in the right direction, toward growth, toward discipline, toward the version of yourself that God is preparing, is an ounce that compounds into something permanent. So seek the hard thing. Choose the difficult road. Wake up earlier than you need to. Train harder than the session requires. Take the cold. Sit in the discomfort of silence. Fast when you could eat. Study when you could rest. Pray when you could distract. Self-inflict the struggle. Not because you hate yourself, but because you love the version of yourself that suffering produces. Because you have enough clarity to understand that the comfortable version of you is not the capable version of you. That the ease you feel today is the capacity you are not building for tomorrow. The greatest men of every age understood this. The conquerors understood it. The Stoics understood it. The athletes understood it. The builders understood it. The men of faith understood it most of all. That the suffering that comes from God is preparing something, and the suffering you choose for yourself is preparing you to receive it. You need the struggle. Embrace it. Choose it. Thank God for it, and become everything it is trying to build in you.